Slave is not a word for chains and captors. It is the word for anyone whose impulses make the decisions. And that description fits more people than will ever admit it. The master already arrived. You just never saw it walk through the door. It came as the impulse you followed, the habit you never questioned, the reaction that moved before the decision could stop it, the comfort that rewarded you just long enough to make the cost invisible. That is not living freely. That is a leash long enough to feel like no leash at all. And here is what the leash has cost. Not tomorrow, already. In the results already on record. In the bridges already reduced to nothing. In the opportunities that closed while the appetite was still spending what could have been redirected. Every failure on the outside was preceded by a surrender on the inside. Not after the fact, before the first move. In the private moment when the direction was clear and the impulse was louder and the impulse won. The surrender was quiet. The result was not.
Chaos outside is manageable. Chaos inside is fatal. That is the equation nobody teaches. The external disorder, the bad market, the difficult people, the systems working against you, that can be navigated. You can hold your position under that pressure. But the internal disorder, the unguarded mind, the uncontrolled reaction, the desire that runs without a director, that cannot be navigated from the outside. That can only be built against from the inside. And if it is not built against, it will spend everything you produce before the production can compound into anything real. An unguarded mind is an open door, not metaphor, mechanism. Whatever walks through that door uninvited does not come to build alongside you. It comes to spend what you cannot afford to lose. And it arrives wearing the face of the thing you already wanted. Your desires will take you exactly where the trap was set, unless you command them first. That is the oldest equation in any war. The opposition does not need superior force. It only needs to read the appetite and place the bait 1 degree off the direction. The hunger does the rest. The hunger walks straight into the position the opposition already prepared, and you called it your own decision because the wanting felt like yours, because the impulse felt like identity, because the habit felt like personality. But the wanting was built by what you consumed. The impulse was built by what you practiced. The habit was installed by what you never examined. None of it was fixed. All of it was chosen. Every repeated choice reinforced the pattern, and the pattern became the person you are walking around inside right now. Is that the person you decided to be? Or is that the person the default built? Because there is a difference. The decided version and the defaulted version both feel like the real one from the inside, but only one of them was built with your hands. Only one of them serves the direction you chose. Only one of them shows up for the hard exchange and holds what needs holding, instead of releasing what cannot be taken back. The default version runs on yesterday's weakest choices. It is a pattern, not a person, and patterns can be broken the same way they were built, one choice at a time, in private, without an audience, without a reward arriving at the same moment. That is where it actually happens, not in the public effort, in the private, unseen, uncredited repetition that no one will ever count, but that determines every outcome anyone will see. Mastery is not a moment. Mastery is 1,000 quiet choices made when no one watches. 1,000 mornings that offered the comfortable option first. 1,000 impulses that were already moving and got turned around before they spent anything irreplaceable. 1,000 times the rage arrived fully loaded, and you held it, not because you lacked the strength to fire, because you had the discipline to aim. That is the building, not the achievement at the end. The 1,000 private decisions that made the achievement structurally inevitable. Rage. Let the word land for a moment, because this is where the structure collapses for most people. Not the discipline of the hours, the discipline of the reaction. A person who cannot control their anger hands the opposition the weapon to destroy them. And the opposition did not have to earn it, did not have to be smarter, did not have to be stronger, did not have to do anything except wait for the moment the anger moved faster than the decision, and then step aside while you destroyed what it would have taken years to rebuild. The fire turned inward, the bridge collapsed outward, and the anger that caused it all was gone in 20 minutes. But what it burned lasted longer. What it said was permanent. What it cost could not be returned. Rage is a fire. Unmastered, it burns the one holding it longest, not the target, the carrier. And the version of you that burned it was not weak. It was undirected. A powerful mind with no governance. A capable body with no compass. Force running without a hand on it. A broken mind wearing a powerful body is not strength. It is destruction wearing the face of strength. And the damage it produces costs twice what any opposition could have extracted, because you paid it yourself at the exact moment the result was finally possible. But the same force, governed, is the thing no opposition can remove. The same intensity, the same hunger, the same fire, aimed with discipline and held with patience, becomes the thing that moves rooms without words, that earns ground nobody can argue with, that builds results so undeniable that the result speaks after every voice that doubted has gone quiet. The one who commands himself commands the room without saying a word. Not by performance, by construction, by what was built in private over a period of time, long enough to make the self-command effortless looking, even though it cost everything and nobody saw the cost. And here is what fills the space between the cost and the result. Not comfort, not confirmation, not one signal from the outside world that the work is building anything at all. Patience. Not patience as soft, not patience as passive, patience as power holding its breath. The decision to keep building in the complete absence of visible return. Because the return is coming. Because the math is not broken. Because the right choices stack, whether or not anything visible confirms the stacking. The stack is real, even when you cannot see it. Every morning you got up and did the work when the result was still absent, you were stacking. Every time the habit offered ease and you declined, you were stacking. Every time the impulse spoke and you directed it instead of following it, you were stacking. Every moment of stillness you built against the pressure of the chaos around you, you were stacking. And the stack does not negotiate. It does not stop building because you stopped watching. It builds in proportion to the choice. Every correct private choice increases the structure, and the structure becomes the person, and the person produces the result, and the result is just the public face of everything built in the private.
Stillness in chaos is not luck. It is years of practice meeting the right moment. That is the mechanism. The person who holds calm in the storm did not arrive there by accident, did not breathe through the crisis by talent. Built the stillness in the smaller storms first, walked into the manageable chaos and held. Then the harder chaos and held again. Then the hardest available storm, and the hold was already built, already structural, already not a decision, already just the character. You do not get that in one choice. You earn it in the pattern, in the repetition of choosing the direction over the feeling, until the direction arrives faster than the feeling, until the discipline leads, until the impulse follows. That reversal is the entire objective. What would change if the impulse followed? What would compound if the appetite was directed? What would become structurally possible if every hour went where you decided instead of where the default took it? That is the version of you that already has the answer, not ahead in some distant future, here, available, requiring only that the negotiation stops. Becoming unbreakable starts the moment you stop negotiating with your own weakness, not when the conditions shift, not when the support arrives, not when the doubt clears. The exact moment the weakness makes its case and you decide the case is closed. Not ignored, closed.
Because the weakness is not the problem. The negotiating with it is the problem. Every person who has ever built anything real felt the same weight, the same pull toward the easier path, the same impulse arriving at the worst possible moment with the most convincing argument it has ever made. The difference is not the absence of the pull. The difference is what happened in the second after it arrived. The unbreakable version did not feel less, it chose faster. It built the character so deep that the choice came before the feeling could make its full argument. That is not suppression. That is mastery. The practiced override, the trained response, the decision that arrived at the front of the line because it had been made so many times in smaller moments that it could now move without being summoned. The body obeys the mind. Train the mind first, not after the physical strength is there. First, because the body trained without a governed mind will fail at the critical moment, not because the body is insufficient, but because the mind that directs it has never been trained to hold under pressure. Weakness of the body can be trained. Weakness of the mind kills the work before the body has a chance to fail. And the mind is trained where? Not in the performance, not in the visible effort that the audience can confirm, in the private moment with no confirmation available. The moment the decision has no witness and no record and no reward attached. That moment is the training ground. That is where the mind either builds or surrenders. And the surrender is always smaller than it feels, small enough to justify, which is exactly why it costs so much over time.
The strongest chains are not the ones placed on you. The strongest chains are the ones you forged from bad habits and called freedom. This deserves its full weight. Not the discipline imposed from outside, the chains chosen from inside. Chosen every morning the comfort won. Chosen every time the impulse took the hour. Chosen every time the anger fired without a direction. Chosen every time the appetite spent what was meant for the build. Chosen, then repeated, then practiced until the chain was structural. And then the chain got a better name. It got called personality, got called preference, got called just how you are. No, that is how the pattern runs. And the pattern was built. And what was built can be rebuilt with the same mechanism. One choice, in private, without a witness, without a reward, until the new pattern is structural, until the new character is the one that moves first. A warrior who cannot rule himself will be ruled by whoever reads what he cannot control. The reading is easy, the weakness is visible. Not to everyone, to the right opposition, always. The one who cannot resist the appetite, they place the bait. The one who reacts before deciding, they create the situation that produces the reaction. None of this requires superior intelligence on the opposition's part. It only requires patience and observation. And the one who lacks self-command provides the blueprint every time the impulse moves in public. Close the blueprint, not by hiding the weakness, by eliminating it, in private, in the repetition that transforms the vulnerability into something with no door.
And here is the question that cuts through the rest of it. What has the unguarded version of you already spent that cannot be recovered? Not hypothetically, in your actual history, the real record, the cost that is already permanent, the decisions already made in the heat of the impulse that you would revise if revision were available. Those costs were not caused by the circumstances. They were caused by the gap between the moment and the discipline, by the absence of the hold at the exact second the hold was required. But that gap is closable. The discipline is buildable, not by wishing the impulse gone, by training the response that arrives first. Every second of practice reduces the gap. Every private victory narrows the space between the impulse and the governance, until the governance arrives first, every time. And on the days the gap opens again, on the days the old pattern reappears with full force, that is not evidence the building failed. That is proof the building was real enough to draw the heaviest pressure. Only structures worth keeping come under the hardest tests. The pressure is not the sign that the work is wrong. The pressure is the sign that the work matters. Hold, not because it is easy, because the hold is the building. Because the hold under the maximum pressure is worth more to the structure than 100 holds in conditions that cost nothing. And what you are building in that held moment, nobody will name it. Nobody will record it. The result will be credited to talent later, to luck, to timing, to advantage. But you will know exactly where it was built, in the private hold, in the moment nobody witnessed, in the refusal to negotiate. Master your appetite. Master your time. Master your tongue. Everything else follows from those three. This is not a hierarchy of virtues. This is an operating system. The appetite unmastered, the hours go where the hunger leads. The time unmastered, the result reflects the default, not the decision. The tongue unmastered, the trust collapses, the bridges close, the credibility spends faster than the work can build it back. And most people run all three on automatic, on the settings installed by the easiest available options, on the reflex trained by the pattern nobody sat down and chose. The automatic can be overridden. The settings can be changed. Not by discipline imposed in a single dramatic moment, by discipline applied in the unremarkable private ones that make the dramatic moments structurally unnecessary. Because the version of you that has to fight the impulse in every visible exchange is still in the early building. The version of you that has built the discipline so deep that the impulse loses the argument before the exchange is visible, that version is the one that moves rooms, commands silence without demanding it, earns respect without requesting it, produces results that speak when every voice has gone quiet. Before conquering anything outside, before any external result confirms the work, conquer the voice inside that says you cannot. Not silence it, not suppress it, conquer it. Walk through it so many times that it stops sending the full argument. Walk through it until walking through it is automatic, until the direction moves first and the doubt has to chase the decision instead of the decision chasing the doubt.
The version of you that mastered that sequence is not a different kind of person, not a different set of starting conditions, not a different level of talent. The same person with a different pattern, built by the same mechanism, one private choice at a time. In the mornings, nobody counted. In the moments, nobody witnessed. In the held breath before the reaction that turned the fire inward and redirected it into the work instead of into the thing that could not be rebuilt. That is all it is. The simplest instruction and the hardest work. The clearest direction and the longest road. Master yourself. And the path runs through the place nobody wants to go. Through the private mornings that feel like they confirm nothing. Through the held anger that nobody credits. Through the appetite redirected in silence. Through the patience that looks like stillness from the outside and feels like controlled burning from the inside. Through every moment the negotiating voice made its strongest available argument and you decided the negotiating was finished. The one who makes that decision again and again and again in the unremarkable moments that build the structure becomes something the opposition cannot spend, cannot read, cannot exploit, cannot outlast. Self-discipline is the armor no opposition can remove, not because it is thick, because it is not a layer worn over the person. It is the person, built into the character, forged in the private, visible only in the result. The greatest enemy never waited outside the gate. It lived behind your eyes. It had access to everything, every doubt, every appetite, every impulse and reaction, an old pattern, every version of you that ever accepted less. And you have been fighting it in the dark, without confirmation, without a record. That fight is the whole thing, not the outcome at the end, the willingness to keep going in conditions that confirm nothing and reward nothing and witness nothing. The willingness to command yourself when no external force is requiring it, when the comfort is close and the cost is high, when the doubt is loudest and the return is most distant. That willingness, forged in private, tested in silence, built one unglamorous choice at a time, is what the unbreakable version of you is made of. It is already being built. In every private hold, in every redirected impulse, in every morning the work happened and the comfort lost. The structure is already rising. The armor is already forming, built in the silence, paid for in the private. And everything outside of you that has been waiting for the real version to arrive, it has been waiting for exactly this. Not for the conditions to improve, for the person to be ready. Master yourself. The person that makes is has never been closer.